Now, the most common cause of an underactive thyroid is autoimmune disease known as Hashimoto's thyroiditis, named after Dr. Hashimoto. Margaret, what's the most common intolerance that we could have in our diet that could make that worse?
Yes, so what causes an autoimmune disease? Well, there are several triggers. People are generally born with a genetic susceptibility to get an autoimmune disease, but then certain environmental factors can trigger it. One of the most common is actually gluten intolerance. Yes. So the majority of people with thyroid problems are actually intolerant to gluten. And it's interesting because you don't have to have celiac disease to be made very sick by eating gluten.
Yes,
so your doctor can test you for celiac disease, and that test could be negative, but if you are manufacturing thyroid antibodies and therefore that's causing a thyroid disease for you, research has shown that stopping eating gluten can stop the production of those thyroid antibodies, and we see it again and again with our patients.
Yes, we do. You know, we may have somebody whose thyroid antibodies are really, really high, and over 12 months they come down to normal after we take them off gluten and we give them a selenium, iodine, vitamin D supplement. And of course we're treating the cause of the thyroid problem, and hopefully early enough that their thyroid tissue will remain normal and they won't need long-term treatment. But, you know, if you are intolerant to gluten, there is a blood test which looks at the type of genetic patterns you have. It looks at the HLA-DQ genotype, and if you have certain patterns in those genes, then you are statistically predisposed to celiac disease and gluten-intolerant diseases. That's a fairly general test, and I know Margaret doesn't have a lot of confidence in it, in that, you know, you tell people to give up gluten anyway, whatever their results are. Yes, because those two genes were only recently discovered. In the next few years, a couple of other genes might be discovered. That's right.
And gluten can affect different branches of the immune system and therefore cause different diseases. And there was a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine listing 55 diseases that can be caused by gluten intolerance. And so tests are really in their infancy. And so many researchers, and we agree, believe that really an elimination diet is the best way to check if gluten is causing health problems for you.
Yes.
And some research shows that it takes more than 6 months of avoiding gluten to experience the full benefits. Some research shows it takes more than 12 months. Yeah. So it's not a diet that you go on and off of.
Yes.
You know, if you're going to avoid gluten, you really have to avoid it 100%. Otherwise, you're going to muck up the results of the elimination diet. So we're not saying that you have to have a completely perfect diet. You know, you'll be like a life sentence. There's gluten-free junk food which you can eat, that it's available. But if you have a thyroid disease, if you have an autoimmune disease, gluten can be really toxic and poisonous for you. Yes. So it's very worthwhile to do a trial of elimination.
Yes. And also gluten can lead to sluggish metabolism, much easier weight gain by damaging other organs or reducing the function of other organs such as the liver. What about the gut? What can gluten do to your gut?
Yes, gluten promotes a lot of inflammation in your body, primarily inflammation in the lining of the gut. But gluten can also compromise liver function. It can make you insulin resistant. Yes. So you don't have to be eating a lot of sugar and carbs. You could just be eating a bit of gluten and be sensitive to that, and then develop syndrome X and find it really difficult to lose weight, and also be exhausted and also retain fluid. Yes. So many health problems can be caused by gluten.
Gluten has many different manifestations.
Yes.
And you know, particularly with the abdominal bloating. You know, that's awful, the way that people get this abdominal bloating, swelling, irritable bowel, and, you know, everything slows down.
Exactly.
And I find a lot that when I tell people to avoid gluten for 6 months, and I often tell them 12 months to really see the benefit, all that goes away, the bloating, and they really start burning fat from the abdominal area.
Exactly.
Yes. So it does take time to get it out of your system, and it's kind of funny, you know, patients will say, well, I gave it up 2 weeks ago and I haven't seen any effect yet.
Yes.
And you've got to impress them. It takes time for that to get out of your body because it's working on your genes. It has a profound effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought we'd look at some of the good and bad fats. You know, there's so many myths in the weight loss world. You know, we've talked about gluten and you know, a lot of dietitians will tell people, eat cereal, eat bread. To me, you know, that can be a big problem for people trying to lose weight. So people get very, very confused.
Yes.
There's so much confusion out there, and they go, oh, I've read that book, I'll follow that for a while. Oh, but then I read that one. And there's too much information. But I think really now, if you distill the research, it's really obvious what's right, and yet the patients don't have time to do that. We have the time to do that.
Yes.
And I think fats in the diet is an area where people get really confused. So tell us, what are the bad fats to avoid because of their effect on our liver and our metabolism?
Well, fat has always been a big part of the human diet, but the types of fats that people generally eat these days have changed a lot. So the fats that come out of factories are the ones you want to avoid. So basically margarine, and it doesn't matter what oil the margarine was made from in the beginning, whether it was olive oil or flaxseed oil or avocado oil. It's the fact that the margarine the oil has been changed from a liquid state into a spreadable state, which damages the delicate fatty acids in the oil.
Changes their shape, right?
Yes, exactly. And vegetable oil in general, on the packet of processed foods, so often you can read the term vegetable oil, and good quality olive oil is expensive, so the food industry doesn't really use it all that much. They're going to use cheap oil. So often it's cottonseed oil. It's a waste product of the cotton industry. You don't want to throw anything away. So let's use a cheap oil instead, increase profits. Other oils which are high in polyunsaturated fats, like corn oil, safflower oil, soy oil, those oils are very easily damaged by heat, by light, just through time, and it's really the extraction process in factories which damages the oil from the beginning.
Yes, that's right. And you know, when you turn a liquid oil into a solid, then you're hydrogenating it and make it very hard for the body to metabolize.
Yes, it's a foreign oil to your body.
It's like plastic, basically. It's the wrong shape. It doesn't fit your cell membranes. It gets into your liver, and your liver goes, what am I going to do with this? You know, this is not really a food. And there's a story that goes, if you leave a tub of margarine out on the beach, the seagulls will come and smell it, but they won't touch it. You know, they know when something's bad for them. So, yeah, you know, we need to stay away from the processed oils. They will put on weight because they disrupt the metabolism in the liver.
In fact, yes, exactly. And our cell membranes are made of fat. So if you've got if you're consuming fats that have an altered structure, your cell membranes won't function well. That predisposes you to insulin resistance, promotes inflammation in your body, really makes it so much harder to lose weight.
Yes. And what about deep fried food?
Well,
deep fried.
It's going to be cheap, nasty oil that's used.
And it's often reused, so it's oxidised.
Absolutely. Cheaper that way.
So that's bad for you, isn't it? And fattening. Whereas stir-fried?
If you use a good quality oil, like extra virgin olive oil or organic coconut oil or ghee even, they are heat stable. And stir-frying is a brief, quick process.
Yes.
So that's fine.
Yeah. As long as you don't really burn it and you're not overheating, I think stir-fry is good. And like Margaret said, the olive oil, coconut oil or ghee.
Yes.
Yes, they're the best ones.
They won't get damaged by heat.
Yeah, great. Now, so we want to stay away from the bad fats, they make us fat. But isn't it good that good fat doesn't put on weight unless we're really binging on it, which we're not going to do.
And it's hard to do that because fat is so filling.
That's right. It's hard to do, isn't it? So tell us about the good fats.
Ideally, you'd eat fat in as close to its natural state as possible. So cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil, humans have been eating that for hundreds of years, so it's an ideal oil to use. Also, macadamia nut oil is really good for you because it's really very high in monounsaturated fat, which is good for your arteries, good for your blood pressure. And like I mentioned, the organic coconut oil is really beneficial. It's high in medium chain triglycerides, which your liver quickly burns up and uses for energy.
Yes.
And as a cooking oil, ghee is good, and butter can be good for you as well, depending on what the cow ate. So if it's grass-fed or pastured butter, then it adds a lot of flavour to food.
Yes, butter's great. And what about saturated fat? You know, I've read different things, and someone will say, well, you know, for the first month of my magic diet, I'll take you off all saturated fat. And I think, I disagree with that personally, because your body needs saturated fat, particularly your brain, to protect your brain, and your body makes hormones out of cholesterol, which is a saturated fat. You make bile out of saturated fat, so I don't believe in eliminating all the saturated fats. And I know that people who are yo-yo dieters, you know, Margaret, where they're going up and then they lose the weight, they're going up like this, it's a seesaw. That's often due to leptin resistance.
Yes.
And they've been on a really low-fat diet, which has disturbed the leptin communication with the brain. So I think that some saturated fat is good, and I think butter is a good example. I think some cheeses, unprocessed cheese, I think full-fat acidophilus yogurt, and you know, definitely the cold-pressed oils and tahini.
Yes, and even, you know, generations ago, people would often eat offal. And they ate a lot more eggs, and they had butter.
Yes.
And they weren't so overweight and diabetic.
That's true.
To how they are now. So they were all traditional parts of the human diet.
Yeah, we lived on the farm and we had the good old eggs and the bacon and made our own cream and cheese, and that wasn't low fat, was it?
Exactly.
And people were slimmer.
Exactly, and healthier.
Yeah, so good fat is good for you, and it'll take away hunger. And especially for the guys, they like to know that they're going to keep on making testosterone because they're getting some cholesterol in their diet, although if you have a healthy liver, it'll make cholesterol. But it's all about balance. You know, the message is, through all the research into the hunger hormones, we know that it's the carbohydrate that disrupts the metabolism. And the fat seems to balance it out, provided it's good, natural, unprocessed fat.
And therefore we've formed our own version of a healthy diet pyramid, haven't we, Sandra?
Yes. Yes, we have, and you can see it on this slide here. So would you like to explain it, Margaret?
So the traditional healthy diet pyramid that you may be familiar with has grains and cereals as the base, therefore encouraging you to eat mainly grains, cereals, bread, pasta, starchy food. But we know that so much of the population just can't handle a lot of food like that because it makes them gain weight, increases their risk of diabetes. So instead, we recommend that you would base your diet on vegetables, some cooked vegetables, a lot of raw salad vegetables, a bit of fruit, and then good sources of protein.
Yes.
That should really be the basis of your diet. And also with some good fats, and grains can be the occasional fun foods, not the 3 meals a day and snacks and sugar in your coffee, not the kind of diet where you're predominantly eating grains or sugar all day.
Yes, and particularly start the day with it and bang, your insulin goes up and you're hungry all day.
Exactly.
You know?
If you start the day with a high carbohydrate meal, you're only setting yourself up for blood sugar fluctuations later in the day and cravings and hunger later in the day.
Yes, so a protein breakfast with a bit of fat is ideal.
Absolutely, it keeps you full for hours. You don't crave biscuits at 11 a.m. like the other people in the office that ate low-fat breakfast cereal.
Yes, and everybody brings in cakes and bickies, don't they, for morning tea? We should be bringing in nuts and seeds and a bit of cheese.
The gluten intolerant people can't eat that anyway, so they're fine. And you
right.
crave them a lot less. If you're eating protein and fat, you just don't crave sugar as much.
we know that gluten intolerance is quite common.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone really knows just how common, because, as you said before, the new genetic molecular tests are in their infancy.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
you know, probably in another decade we'll go, oh, wow, look, bang, there's the total pattern for gluten intolerance, but it's still evolving.
Yes.
So let's look at some of the gluten alternatives, you know, for people to go, oh no, you know, I can't have pasta.
Yes.
So what are some of the grains they can use that are free of gluten?
There's a lot of gluten-free food available in supermarkets and health food stores that I'm sure you've noticed. The majority of it, though, is made from corn flour, rice flour, potato flour, tapioca flour. They're all pretty high starch foods, so which are quickly broken down into sugar. So it's okay to eat some gluten-free stuff occasionally, like gluten-free bread, pasta, crackers, breakfast cereals, but just to be aware that those foods are usually quite high in fat, high in carbohydrate, and have a much higher glycemic index than the regular wheat-based version. So not a great thing if you're looking for weight loss. So it's better to base your diet on foods that never had gluten in them anyway, like vegetables, salads, fish, chicken, eggs, meat, nuts, seeds, fruit. Rice is less likely to cause weight gain than wheat is. And you can also, there are a lot of recipes available where you can make your own baked goods from alternative flours, such as almond meal, coconut flour, chickpea flour, and those things have a much lower glycemic index, and they're a lot better for you than the packaged gluten-free stuff that you can easily find in supermarkets.
Yeah, so some of the gluten-free grains would be rice, teff, amaranth. Any others?
Quinoa is well, it's not exactly a grain, but it's close enough, so it's categorised as a grain.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And buckwheat?
Yes.
Gluten-free?
Yes,
Yeah.
not technically a grain, but it functions like one, so close enough.
So there are lots of things you can do if you want to avoid gluten. There's so many more choices out there today.
That's right, it's not a diet of hardship anymore, but really, there are a lot of options.
That's right. Comes to food choices, the glycemic index has become a very popular measurement of what to choose to eat for your weight and blood sugar control. So the glycemic index has become a bit trendy, if you like, but it's something that people find hard to understand and get their head around, and I also find it a little bit tricky. So we're going to ask Margaret what she thinks of the glycemic index.
So glycemic index is an indicator of how fast and how high a food raises your blood sugar after you eat it. So high glycemic index foods are often foods that are high in sugar or made of grains and cereals. So pure glucose has a glycemic index of 100, and other foods get measured against that. And the theory is that if you follow a mostly low glycemic index or low GI diet, that's going to help you keep your weight under control, it'll help to keep your diabetes under control, etc. And officially, if a food has a glycemic index of 55 or less, that's considered a low GI. It's not all that low, though, and most chocolate fits into that category.
Oh, good.
So we actually don't think that you should rely on knowing the glycemic index of a food to then determine what you're going to eat. We really recommend that you think about the total carbohydrate content of your diet and try to keep that lowish. So you know that sugar, grains, starches, cereals are the highest carbohydrate containing foods. So it doesn't really matter whether their GI is high or moderate or low. The foods are high in carbohydrate. If you eat too much of them, you're going to gain weight or you won't be able to lose weight. So I often get patients at the clinic saying, I've been following a low GI diet. Well, that's good for maintenance, but if you want to change your current scenario, if you want to lose weight, you really have to get the total carbohydrate content of your diet down.
Yes, I agree. It's the amount of carbohydrate, the grams of carbohydrate that you're eating at each meal and every day that's more important than the glycemic index. And it's easier to understand too. So thank you, Margaret.